Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Catherine Mattice, coming at you from my home office today. I am the founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We are an organization focused on building positive, thriving work environments. And I'm super excited because I'm a LinkedIn Learning course author, and LinkedIn asked me to revamp and renew. It had been a few years, my harassment prevention course that's available on the LinkedIn library. And we kind of call it Harassment Prevention 2.0. To be clear, it's not the California compliant version. What it is taking the concept of harassment and incivility and kind of pulling it out of that compliance box and into the relationship box. So I think because harassment is unlawful, as it should be. A lot of times HR can get really caught, and anybody really can get really caught up in the compliance aspect of it, or the unlawful part of it. You know, if somebody feels harassed and they file a hostile work environment complaint with HR, HR has to do an investigation, and that investigation is all really focused on the facts, whether or not that actually happened. It's a Law and Order being a detective kind of a scenario. And so then the organization can say you engaged in unlawful acts, or you didn't, or it was unsubstantiated, and we'll address it accordingly. Of course, we need all of that. But what we're missing is the realization that this is a human problem. And we need to think about harassment or pull ourselves a little outside of that compliance box and turn our attention towards the relationship aspect. So I live in California, where, of course, the harassment prevention training is required every 2 years, and a lot of other states are following suit. I know it's required in New York and Rhode Island and some other states. And so, because what's required to be in the training is dictated by the law. Lawyers essentially wrote training objectives for what belongs in that training. It's missing some key elements. And so that's where, to circle back to my harassment prevention course, that's where this comes in. So I have this slide up because I wanted to share it with you. It really kind of highlights my position on harassment and how an organization should resolve it. And this spectrum is in the LinkedIn Learning course. And so just on this conversation of being more focused on the human aspect that is harassment, if we're going to call a training course harassment prevention, which is what we call it here in California, definitely don't call your training harassment training, because it's training on how to prevent it, right? But the learning objectives are things like what a manager should do when they get a complaint, what a person should do if they're feeling harassed or witnessing harassment. I always hear of, there's apparently a very well-used course here in San Diego or here in California that's online, where I keep hearing about this course where you're given a scenario and then you're supposed to say whether it's harassment or not. And then it's kind of like, nope, that's not harassment. You're wrong. Or yes, you're right. It is harassment. And again, cool. We need to know exactly what harassment is, but we also need to recognize that it's not so black and white, and these things don't fall in a bucket. So anyway, when I'm talking about harassment prevention, what I'm talking about is what you see on the far left of your screen, which is things like incivility, unresolved conflict, teasing, sarcasm, microaggressions, unprofessionalism, like all these lower level behaviors or lawful behaviors that we don't necessarily address because they're not unlawful, and we often don't really even know what to do with them, right? So you probably, in your organization, if you're a manager, you've probably never been trained on what to do if you learn that somebody is gossiping, or what to do if you learn that there's a clique that can be overly sarcastic and kind of hurting people's feelings. a lot of times people say, well, just be adults, deal with it, move on. But that behavior, if allowed to go on, that's the behavior that escalates into things like harassment and bullying and hazing and mobbing. So if we're really going to talk about harassment prevention, then we need to focus on the behaviors that escalate into harassment and bullying if we're not addressing them. So my course on LinkedIn Learning is really about this. How does a manager step in when they're hearing about pervasive teasing? Because that pervasive teasing can easily shift and start going into sexual comments, teasing about someone's gender or personal life, right? So, think more about that other side of the spectrum. And tons and tons and tons of research shows that if you do not address those things, they do escalate. In fact, bullying absolutely occurs if people have conflict that goes unresolved, because what happens is one person starts to try to take power over the other, or both are trying to take power. Because if you're, in conflict, you're not feeling powerful. And humans are focused on that. And so one person or both starts to get more and more aggressive in sort of winning the conflict. And it can certainly escalate to bullying. And then quickly wanted to call your attention to bullying and workplace violence and how closely those are related. So again, here in California, we have a new law around having a workplace violence prevention plan. And again, we have a box for harassment. We have a box for workplace violence. Where's bullying in all of this? Where's pervasive teasing in all of this? Where's the how to resolve gossip in all of this? Yes, Trine, exactly. We need to be proactive. So just to highlight how bullying and violence are so similar in that, for example, so I coach people who engage in bullying, and the organization wants to keep these individuals because they're very valuable to the organization, and I'm able to help them back down and be a better leader. But one individual that I coached, people described that he would lean over the table and like get in people's face, or that he would kind of have this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing where he was, casually sitting there, but then he would sort of get angry and you could just see it overcoming him, and his vein would be popping out of his forehead and his eyes bulging, and, just kind of this real aggressive facial expression and body language. And that counts as workplace violence. It absolutely counts as workplace violence. And here in California, although they don't call it out when they're talking about the definition of violence for this violence prevention plan, they're absolutely talking about bullying. So just keeping all of this in mind. Of course, compliance is important. I'm not saying we don't do all of that, but I'm saying in addition to, or your harassment initiative, harassment prevention 2.0 initiative needs to be focused on your company culture, how you manage the nuanced behaviors, the incivility, the sarcasm, the gossip, and managing that. If you can manage that, then you will absolutely prevent harassment. Thank you for taking the time to watch. To my viewers who left a comment, I'm going to just put a link here in the comments. That is the link to my LinkedIn Learning course. We're going to make it free for 24 hours, so you can check it out if you'd like. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.